Why would we teach someone to be critical and then say, but do what I said, but do what I want? Like, that is the ultimate contradiction, hypocrisy, and it happens everywhere, and it happens in academia. A good researcher would say, okay, they're saying I can't do it that way. Why not? Who said that? What would that mean? So yeah, there's that contradiction of they kind of want you to be critical and they talk about critical engagement. It's confusing.
Welcome to the Grad Coach podcast, or the GCPC, of course, if you're just trying to save a little bit of time, where, as ever, we are here to simplify, demystify, and take all the anxiety out of academia. And also, as ever, I remain your host, Dr. E. But today, I'm joined by Dr. Lorena Sanchez-Tyson, who with years of experience in higher education, Dr. Sanchez-Tyson has stored up a world of knowledge from supervising dissertations and theses at the University of Hertfordshire, Oxford University, that one, the University of Warwick as well. And having worked with over 80 students in that time, Lorena knows exactly what your examiners, your supervisors, committee members, chair people are looking for, and therefore exactly what it takes for you to pass that postgrad degree. And in this conversation, Dr. Sanchez-Tyson is going to share 5 gems of wisdom for research success that she wishes every student knew before starting their dissertation or thesis. So if you are just getting started with any sort of postgrad research project, these secrets will save you months of stress and set you up for an easy stroll on the way to the win. And while you're here, of course, don't forget to grab your free copy of the Grad Coach Research Toolkit. You will find that in the link in the description down below. It's packed with hundreds of templates and checklists and video tutorials and guides. Basically, everything that you need to fast track your research and save your sanity. I am telling you, I've done it. And over 10,000 students as well have already signed up and used this to get something of an unfair advantage, and you can too now. Otherwise, of course, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can kind of get a warning every single time we've got a new podcast coming up. And of course, feel free to comment with any questions that you might have for any of our future professors. Dr. Lorena Sanchez-Tyson, are you ready to get into this?
I'm ready.
Good stuff. All right. Okay. So let's get into these gems of wisdom. So, gem number 1. The first thing you've said here, Dr. Sanchez-Tyson, is the research gap is a myth. It's about adding your voice to an existing debate. It's an interesting quote of yours. And I guess this is the whole kind of like there's nothing new under the sun thing, right? And I get, maybe you're right. Thousands of years of research, millions of research papers. How substantive a gap can there really be? But surely even less so with the ever elusive voice, no? The thing that academics are always talking about. In other words, tell us what qualifies as a voice for a research paper, and how exactly is it added to a debate?
Gosh, that's a good question. I thought you were going to ask me about the gap. It's about kind of really focusing on that idea, right? So there's a running thread always of what it is that you're most interested in, what it is that you want to research. That voice will be there. It just takes some time to develop. So I think it's about kind of navigating this terrain of what you're hoping to get ultimately is that kind of seat at the table and being a part of the conversation. I would just tell any student, and I've told my students this as well, where they say, here I am reporting on other people's findings and this and that. What about my experiences? What about my thoughts on this? What about my, thoughts about what I want to do in the future and how I think this might help people? I said, yes, that all has a place and that will play a role. But it's about that kind of those building blocks of you start by listening. So reading and hearing that conversation, and then you can enter it. And then that voice, I don't want to say, comes easily or naturally, but rather you start to gain that confidence as you write, hopefully as you are able to discuss with your supervisor, hopefully as you talk to your friends, and that voice can kind of come through. Yeah, I think it's like anything. You have to practice.
Let's move on to your second gem of wisdom here, Dr. Sanchez-Tyson. You said critical engagement has more to do with curiosity than criticism. This is compelling. But I'm curious, if critically engaging refers to the assessment, investigation, or interrogation of an existing research paper, then on what basis can a master's or a PhD paper launch that kind of critique, even if it is only out of curiosity? In other words, what I'm asking, I guess, is how critical should we be in writing a research paper and engaging with existing research?
I mean, again, there's no kind of level of criticality that would ever be like, oh, okay, this is enough, right? Because it will, again, always depend on the project, the kind of field, all of these things. The key message there is we hear so much again about like this paragraph wasn't critical enough. You should show more critical engagement. Again, what does a student do with that kind of feedback? You go like, but how would I show more critical engagement? And the kind of rest of that oversimplified feedback is always read wider. What are you interested in? What are people saying? That thread of what you are most interested in is what I hope, the process of studying, which can be so taxing, so difficult. Students have multiple things going on, not just studies, but lives, right? Is that curiosity is what I hope students can come back to. You can return to that. You can say, okay, what was I curious about? Have I had a deep dig and dive into this? I know a bit. I've read this. I've seen some contrasting things. I've pointed out the limitations of so-and-so's this and this. But there's still so much more, I think, in that process of critical engagement. At what point do we know we're finished? I mean, probably never. But I think it's also coming to terms with that is like, that I won't ever be able to cover every single thing. I won't ever be able to unpack every single critique or every weakness and strength and perfectly. It's more about at what point do you feel that curiosity has carried you to a place where you are able to say, and now this is why I'm doing this project. And now this is why it's going to contribute something different, maybe new, maybe just different, right?
So when you're referring to using curiosity for the purposes of critical engagement here, you're talking about using curiosity as a driving force to kind of push you through that critical engagement with a particular source or particular sources in order to arrive at a point of justification or a platform for your own research. You don't necessarily mean like curiosity just for its own sake. So you don't mean curiosity just to continue pursuing whatever it is that you're interested in to the nth degree and never really end up with anything. You mean curiosity specifically as a means by which to dive into a piece of work in order to provide you with a platform for your own research. Have I understood that correctly?
I mean, yeah, I think it could be both, to be honest. Like, I think there is a means to an end when you're a postgrad student, right? There is a degree at the end that you're hoping to get. There is a next role that you're hoping to get. Like, I think what research can do and the skills and the experience that you have, that can be something that can kind of carry you through the rest of your career. I had one of my good friends during my doctorate. I remember there was a point, sorry, I'm going to go into a little story here. I remember there was a point when, it was close to submission, close enough that I was, just sort of going in circles and thinking, I'll never be done. This will never be enough. I don't know, maybe one of the stages that a lot of people go through. And I remember my friend really just saying, it doesn't have to be finished. She said, this can be your life's work. This just has to wrap up. This thesis has to wrap up, right? And when I reframed it that way, when she helped me reframe it that way, it was sort of thinking, again, I can stay curious about this, but this time, for this purpose, for this paper, I just need to tie up the loose ends, acknowledge that I won't, be able to capture everything, and then you carry it forward in different ways. So I think it can be both. I think it can be the curiosity is what you can return to and kind of say, okay, what is it here that I want to say in this paper? What is it? What is one of my key findings? And how is it connected? And you carry it forward in the rest of your professional life, right?
I'm with you 1,000%. This is kind of like slightly more holistic, uplifting way of looking at this than I was expecting. Like, this is a nice kind of, hey, take it easy. Like, these things can coexist. Like, what's wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
It's
Two
quite
things
nice.
can be.
I agree with you.
Two things can be true at once. Yeah.
So let's move on to your third gem of wisdom here that you wish our students, or you wish students, generally speaking, were aware of. So, Lorena, you said focus beats flashiness, and clarity means more than ambition. Now you're talking to the wrong one here. I'm all about ambition, but nevertheless, let me just see if I've understood this correctly. You seem to be suggesting that there's some humility in academic focus and the accuracy of our work, but since the goal is so often to produce a substantive contribution to the field, and given the sheer quantity of existing research, does that not require some measure of ambition? I mean, in other words, what, if any, is the appropriate balance between clarity and ambition, focus and flashiness? How do we balance these?
All of them, clearly. Anyone engaging in this kind of endeavor in their life clearly has a lot of ambition, whether that's, again, for the degree, for their future, as a culmination of things, because people enter these at different stages in their life, right? I have a doctoral student, who's more towards the end of their career. There's still ambition there, right? Like, so that's still there. What I'm specifically talking about with this point is in terms of kind of your research design overall, which is absolutely the ambition to contribute something new, significant, carve your little space out in your field, especially, again, the pressure in academia that can be so huge in terms of, you have to have these papers and you have to have worked with this person and you have to have been cited this many. So if there's all that, like all of that happens, and yes, there is certainly an argument to be had that, like, if you can design a project at a postgraduate level that is ambitious and you think will really go somewhere, by all means, go for it. But I think you should also be acknowledged that, you are still at a point in training where a really well designed and executed project, even if it's at a scale that some might call smaller, but is still really, really thoughtfully designed, can be just as interesting, just as significant, just as everything. And then again, this isn't the last time in your life that you'd be able to contribute something, and you're more prepared then to take on a bigger scale, right? So if a student comes to me, for example, my background is mostly in qualitative research, but I've done a little bit of quantitative, some systematic reviews, etc. So I think it's about be ambitious, but also just at a scale that is realistic, so that in the end you're not drowning in data and really, like, the pressure is on to just have this magical, wonderful thing that's going to change the world. You kind of have to step away from that a little bit, I would say, to students, and say, you may not change the world. You may change this little corner of the world. And that's okay. And that's a contribution.
So, okay, but you said the kind of the golden word here. You said the contribution word, like the big C word that scares everybody, right? So we can't really use that language to terrify a few people. So we've said the C word here. We've referenced the contribution.
Yeah. So
it would be remiss of me not to kind of push you a little bit on this. I kind of have to know a little bit more. So ground level terms and in day-to-day terms, what does that actually mean for a student? So if a student's saying, listen, on the one hand, yes, I've got this exceptional project that I think I've kind of constructed to the nth degree and it's almost beautifully put together, but I don't know if it's necessarily contributing anything, that I'm not necessarily being ambitious enough in what I'm doing. Is there something that we should be doing in order to factor that ambition into our projects? Is there some way that we should be going about this in order to make sure we're meeting that standard? Or are you saying that kind of thing just expresses itself as a consequence of the accuracy of the way you've constructed your project?
So I think there's two things kind of that can happen at the same time. One is to fully understand, to pay attention to be, really aware of the institutional kind of frames that we have to kind of go by, right? So you can at the same time say, I know I need to have a really clear impact statement that says, to the specific audiences that I think would be interested in the findings of this study, etc. And at the same time, I always say this to my students too, which is they're like, oh, the gap, or I want to study things like, AI, because now it's quite big, right? So AI education. Oh, but everyone's already writing about it and blah, blah, blah. And I said, but you haven't. You are the only one right here, right now, in this institution writing this. So it will contribute. So like that to me is undeniable. And you can kind of, again, throw that out the window thinking that I wouldn't make a new contribution. You are the only one doing this ever, like looking at it in this specific way. Even if it's something that's been done a lot, every student, every project, every idea will still come to it in a different way. If you think of contribution in like the institutional packaged form, that will be there, and you can make sure that you are meeting that criteria. Absolutely. I mean, and it depends, I guess, on how like systematic you want to be about it, right? If you want to say, you know what, this is going to be an original contribution by its very nature, or you want to say, I want to start thinking about how it's going to be an original contribution to make sure that it fits with what my department is expecting with this or that. Or you can do both. I don't know. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense to me. Look, I kind of agree with you, right? And it's speaking to what you're saying just now, this idea that there's something original and contributory just by virtue of the fact that you're doing this project here and now. My PhD professor said the same thing to me. So when I asked him the same question, and I said the same thing as I was saying to you earlier on. I mean, look, it's thousands of years of research. There's thousands of papers. It would be the height of arrogance to assume that I'm the only one that's come up with this question in this particular way. And no one's ever asked this, right? Somebody always, one of my father's friends always told me that whatever question it is that you're looking for, someone's written the answer somewhere, right? You just got to look hard enough and it will be there somewhere. With thousands and thousands of years of writing, there's an answer to that question somewhere. And although that was encouraging when I was younger, it ended up becoming discouraging when I got to my PhD, because it was like, dang, if the answer's there, then what am I doing? Like, if somebody's already done this, what am I covering here? And my PhD professor said the same thing to me that you're saying now, that like, the fact that you're doing this the way that you're doing it at the time that you're doing it in the situation in which you're doing it will make it an original contribution. There's just this hesitance on the part of students, myself included, at the time, certainly, to think that that's enough. Right? There's always that sense of, is that going to be good enough? Particularly since the measure for what's good enough is often so gray, so ambiguous, so vague, and being determined by somebody outside of yourself. And the variability from one professor to the next ends up making that even more complicated. So, I mean, if I was your student, I feel like I would have had a good time. Like there's this holistic kind of, hey, two things can be true at once approach, and that would have been okay. I feel like I might have gone through faster and further. But nevertheless, in the case of my experience and the experience of many of the students that we work with, it doesn't quite work like that. And the demands seem so high and yet so kind of smoky and so unclear that it's really, really difficult to gauge whether or not just saying me doing this myself at this time under these conditions is going to be a meaningful contribution, and then trying to find a way of phrasing that and working that into a project. So just before we go on to your next gem, have I missed something, or is there something that you want to kind of like add to the point that we've made here with respect to that kind of originality and contribution?
I mean, I don't think I need to add anything new, because you said something that I think is really important, and that students should just rewind and go back and listen to what you said, which was you can hear this message and you can even internalize it to a degree and saying, this is original, it's going well, okay. And at the same time, the huge pressure, competition, all of that still exists, right? And you said, our professors are expecting something and this is expecting something. But in the end, like, I think it's acknowledging that there are things in your control and then there are things out of your control. Like you can't control what the job market is going to be like in the next 2 days, let alone 2 years when you finish your degree. You can't, control if your professor's having a bad day or if you never really got along or something. Like there's so many variables that I think you just have to sit when the kind of negativity or anxiety comes in. And I'm saying this because I had to do this, and I still, to some degree, have to do this myself, is say, that's true. It's hard, but also I'm here and I am the only one doing this. And it sounds so cheesy, right? To say like, that's enough. But it's not a thing. You don't arrive at a state of enough, right? You always have to kind of remind yourself.
I like that. So you don't arrive at a state of enough. I think it's a really, really good point to mention. So besides the fact that y'all heard it here first, Dr. E is Dr. E. There's a reason why I host these shows. You know what I mean? Like y'all heard
there
it.
You go.
But that aside, you're right. I think that's a really, really kind of interesting point, that you don't arrive at a state of enough. It's not a state that you arrive at. It's something else. Like it's a description. It's kind of a qualitative description of the work that you're doing. But okay. Let's move on to your fourth gem of wisdom here that you wish our students knew. And Lorena, you said clarity, critical thinking, and steady progress mean more than scale or complexity. Now, of course, the problem here is that, as we said a moment ago, supervisors, professors, committee members, chairpersons, whoever it is that's overseeing your research project, these are people just like anybody else. And beyond their degrees and the positions of authority that they hold, their views are informed by subjective preferences, experiences, priorities. So how do we navigate a situation where our definitions of clarity, critical thinking, and steady progress don't seem to align with the people who are overseeing our research projects? So in other words, I guess what I'm asking is, do we acquiesce to all of our supervisors' demands and approaches, or is there scope for disagreement even at the risk of disappointing them?
Absolutely. I think we'd be doing everyone a disservice if we don't give students the space to question. Like, why would we teach someone to be critical and then say, but do what I said, but do what I want? Like, that is the ultimate just contradiction, hypocrisy, and it happens everywhere, and it happens in academia. And so I would encourage students to really think, again, it's sort of this precarious navigating of, obviously, you need to go through these, maybe types of gatekeepers. You need to go through these stages of an examination or a viva or whatever it is, right? So I think it's just about navigating that. At times, it's, again, sort of picking your battles. At times, is this the hill you want to die on, that, you needed to use this theory when they're suggesting something else and this other person suggests, like, you can probably adapt. Are you feeling like there's an undue amount of pressure to use a certain theory or paper because someone that they know, then push back, right? I would hope that people could feel, but I understand I know what it's like to be in kind of the precarious student, even if you have some prospects of after graduation. What you don't want to do is sort of rock any boat so much that you're not going to get the reference, or you're not going to do this. So yes, I would say it will always depend, but I mean, institutions, in the end, they have a duty of care to everyone, but the students are the reason we're there. I would not be where I am without other people kind of following and wanting to learn more. And so you pay it forward, but like, why would you kind of pull up the ladder and say, no, it's, you can't do it that way? Well, there has to be a good reason. So again, a good researcher would say, okay, they're saying I can't do it that way. Why not? Who said that? Where is that? What would that mean? So yeah, there's that contradiction of, they kind of want you to be critical and they talk about critical engagement, and then all of a sudden you're like, but do this. Why? But, oh no, don't ask why. But you taught me how to ask why. No, but, oh my gosh. And you sort of, yeah, it's confusing.
I mean, I agree with you 1,000%. And I feel like it's a problem that our students and students generally speaking bump into all the time, because there's this inherent, or the way I've described it with our clients in the past, is that there is a natural tension even in the way they describe the project itself. So if you're paying attention to the description of a research project, that tension is built in. So the idea that on the one hand, there is a structured, formatted, traditional way to approach a research project. On the other hand, there's this obligation to do something new and contributory and original and so on and so forth. Well, if it's original, it's not going to be traditional. And if it's traditional, it's not going to be original. And you're asking me to do both of these things at the same time in kind of like a weird tension. And then somehow that supervisor, that professor, that who what have you, depending on how they see themselves in their relationship to their university or the institution, generally speaking, either acts as gatekeeper or guide through that tension, depending on the way they kind of position themselves. And I agree with you that that's that ends up being the problem that they end up trying to confront. So from your experience, from your point of view as a person who's been through it yourself personally, you've got the degrees and what have you, and now you're in a position where you're advising students and telling them how to pass these degrees and telling them what to do in these circumstances, and perhaps, I don't know, to some of the students that you're dealing with, they might feel as though the advice you're giving them isn't as clear as they want it to be, or maybe they're hesitant to ask you the kinds of questions that you're encouraging they should ask. So are you suggesting that students, generally speaking, should see their engagement with their professors, their supervisors, their committee, their chair members, whoever it might happen to be, they should see that as a kind of like an open discussion where there are battles to be won? Or is it more a matter of just pure deference? Like, should we just defer to whatever it is that they want, do what they say, and then just move on? Because ultimately, our curiosity is going to take us beyond this project to bigger things. Which way are we leaning here?
I mean, I would lean towards the first one, which is there's a time and place for a degree of deference, certainly, but also kind of you're at a level where, again, this is kind of the vague advice, which is like, build your voice and blah, 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 expertise. Well, a part of that is also, and I think we'd be doing students a real disservice if we're not encouraging, again, some building confidence and assertiveness of, no, I know what I'm talking about. And that sounds a little bit like, bragging, but actually we want the students to be, they're going to be the experts in their project and their field. And our role is to guide that. And it's not to micromanage or control or anything. I know in some instances, some of those things can happen. And I think, again, the students, maybe you get some of these, right, where they're really struggling, or it's really challenging kind of team of advisors, or something's happening. Then you go kind of on a case by case basis. You can't just say, oh, well, I'll take kind of a deference approach, or I'll take a battle approach. It will always depend. And I think I've been quite lucky that my supervision team, the teams I'm on now where I'm supervising doctoral level things, it's such a lovely kind of space where people are just intellectually engaging and curious. Again, there's my word, curious, supportive, but I know that that's not always the case. I just know what I know from that experience, which is, I think it works. Like, it goes a long way to sort of give students the time and space to question, to say, no, I'd rather not do that. And then sometimes you have to kind of say, like, okay, so you want to try this new approach? Okay. Like, maybe in the back of my mind, I'm going like, oh no, maybe that's not such a good idea. Again, we're training, right? We're learning how to do this. No one knows it, just from one day to the next. And if we don't try and practice and get on the bicycle and, go and fall down sometimes, like, we're not going to learn. And it's a process, I think.
I like this. We've gotten a little bit Batman with this, but I'm with you. Why do we learn to fall, Bruce? So we can get back up. But that's okay. It's cool. It's all right. We got a little Batman with this. That's fine. Okay, Lorena, so let's move on to your fifth gem of wisdom here for our students. And you said in your fifth quote, messy notes, conversations with friends over coffee, thoughts on long walks, that's your research. You kind of got me reminiscing about thinking in coffee shops and long strolls that felt like floating on your thoughts, and hours at my desk constructing ideas. Although, admittedly, as a philosopher, it was kind of more me on my own and less me talking to friends, because otherwise they'd be sick of me after a while. But still, these
you got to find philosopher friends.
Yeah, they don't get along. Like, I don't know if you. we don't like each other. But in any case, so these almost idyllic moments that you're describing must at least be punctuated with producing written work, right? So how do we blend messy notes and reflection with focused writing and production?
All of these things that don't seem like research can play a part, right? So yes, you have to have words on the page eventually. You have to have things. That happens, but I think it's how it happens is what students kind of feel or tend to feel a lot of pressure with, right? So they're sitting there and they're like, a doctoral student sometimes, this kind of generic advice of just treat it like a full-time job and 8 hours a day and blah, blah. And so someone's sitting there at a desk and going, I have sat here for 8 hours and I haven't written a single word, and you feel like that's where imposter syndrome and all these things, and like it feels awful, or it can feel really kind of terrifying because you're going, oh my gosh, this wasn't productive at all. But again, it's about, and I tell students, think back then. If you didn't write a single word, what was happening? You went and you talked to a friend about what was going on and they suggested something. You wrote down a few things. That is part of it. As in, it's not the ultimate part. It's not your research as in what it's going to be out in the world, but it is your journey in all of that. And that includes, and you say it sounds idyllic, like actually I had coffees with friends that, were just like on the verge of tears going, why are we doing this? Right? Like, not that idyllic, but that is also really important, is like to remember. And maybe it's not the case in philosophy if you guys don't like each other, but like, it's about remembering that you're not alone. Like, it can feel so isolating and solitary, but those notes, just leave them for a day. You go and have that walk and you think, that's part of your research. You go and have that coffee with a friend, whether you laugh or cry, that's also because it's more than just this output at the end. There's so much behind that. That's what I would hope kind of a student, maybe if they're struggling with some of these things of like, I feel like my word counts down. I feel like I don't, like, all of this should be more advanced than it is. But what all of the things that had to happen, even for you to have that draft of a chapter or that paragraph that you labored 3 days over and you're sitting there going like, it shouldn't have taken me this long. It had to, because in the end, that's what got you there. Like it can be a bit painful. Like you're sitting there really, and at the end of the day, you would wish you had something to show for, like in words, for all the thinking. But we're not it would be different if we were producing some sort of artifact or something. You get to see the result, right? You build a house and you see it at the end. In research, you think and think and think and you see nothing sometimes, but it's still there. It still happened, right? So yeah.
No, I'm with you 1,000%. I think I agree with you. And we've, in previous podcasts, we've talked about this particular issue that's central to research in terms that you're talking about, because you don't really produce a physical, tangible product at the end of it. There's no physical reflection on the thing.
You have to print it and hold it. I think that's important.
I think that's absolutely a thing. 1,000%. I think you're absolutely right.
Yes.
I mean, I will say that there's a degree to which, maybe for the purposes of research, there's a degree to which it's less a matter of what you can do with it as much as what it does to you. And the change that you go through in order for you to be able to produce that research, as you're saying, towards the end of it. But in those previous podcasts, and yes, I have said that twice now, so you guys are supposed to go and check out the previous podcast, but after this one, like, so as soon as you're done, go click. The adverts will come up. You know how this works. But the point is that what we've suggested in the past is that maybe it's not, as you said, it's not to think of it like a job and you just do 8 hours at a shift and so on and so forth, because no one's paying you for this. Number one. Number two, it's not in order to kind of like, feed your family or your kids or your husband or your wife or whatever else with this. That's not what this is for. But rather it's the kind of thing that you're supposed to eat, sleep, live and breathe, right? So even if it does mean that you're spending your time thinking about this in coffee shops with your friends, and even if it does mean that you're spending your time thinking about this over long walks, even if it does mean that you're thinking about this in difficulty, in struggle, in emotional kind of turmoil, we're trying to figure out what does and doesn't make sense, it's the immersion in it and the commitment to the immersion in it that ends up producing the work that you're looking for, that ends up making this a better piece of work than might otherwise be the case, where sometimes people will just drop in and drop out, or don't really kind of commit themselves to it. But just to kind of follow up on that, I'm just curious, what happens when a person can't afford to do that? Like, what happens when a person just doesn't have the space or the time or the freedom or the room to make their research project something that they spend that much time on, or to commit that much time, that much thought time to their research project? Like, what happens if you're the kind of individual where you do just happen to have 2 kids, a husband or a wife, a house, you just moved home, something like that. Like, your kids are just moving to a new school. There's teachers on your phone all day long because one of them's misbehaving. Yeah. And your professor is hitting you up because you haven't handed in that methodology that was due 3 months ago. And you're like, my guy, I still don't know what quantitative research even means. So in those circumstances, how do we address the commitment to the work that you're implying here when life is pulling us in all these directions?
I would say yes. I mean, when we go for those long walks and think about research and talk to our friends and talk about our research, and yes, sometimes get sick of hearing us talk about our research. Yeah, to a degree, I would say it's immersion, it's commitment, it's you've undertaken this step. There's, again, for different reasons for different people, different end goals, all of that. Although I would have to disagree with you on what you said of like live, eat, and breathe this stuff and embody this researcher, time in your life. Because even if someone was privileged enough to not have to worry about money and rent or food or relationships or all of those things, I don't even think that would necessarily make something better research. It's just different because they had more time to think about it. Like, it's just different. And none of us, even the most people without as many of those worries, I think there's a point also where it just becomes unhealthy. I don't think you should live, eat, and breathe it. We contain multitudes, right? We are way more than that degree that we're doing or than the research that we're doing. And I think it's important sometimes if we can get sucked into it, but it is important to take the weekends off if you can, and to go on the little holiday if you can, and to go and have the dinner and not talk about your research if you can. And because life is messy and complicated and unexpected things happen, right? So maybe you've made this wonderful plan and you say, I will finish in 3 years, and then a family member gets ill or you get ill or something. I think, again, I would hope that institutions, they do, I think, to a degree. How well they do it is a different question. You have to understand that students are people just like anyone else. And I would say to someone who maybe is undertaking a postgraduate degree at a point in their life when they know they will have to juggle those things, is that conscious decision is made already knowing how to juggle these things, right? I mean, you have a family and the kids and you have to juggle a job, and now you have to juggle the job and the thing. So it's adding something to your plate. I guess in a way I would say, this too shall pass. Like, it's temporary. It will be hard. It will be hard. It will be fun sometimes. And embrace that, take the opportunities, go to the conference in the evening if you can to talk to people you haven't met. Like, I think it's about trying to, as much as you can, say, how can I make the most of this? Even if I know it's going to be like juggling and there are always unpredictable things that can happen. It's just kind of trying to remember to make the most of it. It will wrap up at some point.
Okay. Well, on that note,
you
brought us right round nicely to it.
That.
Look, now we're going to have to look at that. It's like you knew it was happening. Well done.
I knew.
On that note, let's. I think we have to wrap today's episode of the Grad Coach Podcast. But before we do, I just wanted to thank you again, Dr. Lorena Sanchez-Tyson, for sharing those insights. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing all that input with us. And thank you for being with us here today and giving us those gems of wisdom.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And for you guys, of course, please don't forget to grab your free copy of the Grad Coach Research Toolkit. It really is loaded with like templates and checklists and video tutorials and guides that all really will save you a bunch of time. I mean, you can spend 3 minutes finding that stuff and save yourself 3 months of trying to figure it out yourself. You will find the link waiting for you in the description below. I did make sure it was there for you, I promise. Don't say I didn't do anything for you, okay? And last but not least, remember, of course, to hit that like and that subscribe button so you do not miss future episodes. And as I said beforehand, please feel free to comment and ask any questions you want us to put to the next professor that we have. We're going to have plenty more expert advice lined up to help you on your research journey. But until then, thank you all one more time. Peace, productivity, and positive results.